Hello, good afternoon, everybody. I am not sure if we're going to have any more trustees joining us today, but we do have our quorum now, so I think we'll go ahead. We've got a good agenda in front of us, so without further ado, I'll go ahead and call our meeting to order here at 3:02. Do we have a motion to confirm the minutes from our last meeting? Or any changes that need to be made?
The Albemarle County's resolution.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're right. I will call, I don't have a copy of that. We've changed how we need to call these meetings to order. All right, well, this hybrid meeting of the Jefferson-Madison Regional Library Board is being held pursuant to and in compliance with Albemarle County's ordinance number 20-A16, an ordinance to ensure the continuity of government during the COVID-19 disaster. As an aside, we will pass that back down to David. We'll talk about this a little bit more in the meeting, but Albemarle County is working their way back towards more in-person meetings, and that will have some effect on us as well. So anyway, thank you. Sorry about that. Sure. Does anybody have any changes they need to make to our minutes from last month? And if not, do I have a motion that we could approve them?
I so move.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Meredith, you're still on mute there. I saw that though. Okay, wonderful. Ophelia, I'd like to say thank you very much for having us here at the Louisa County Library this month. Is there anything you'd like, not to put you on the spot, but if you have anything you'd like to say, here's a moment.
Maybe right here in the corner. Watch all these cords.
Sure, that's fine.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Ophelia. I'm the branch manager here at the Louisa Library. I'd like to welcome you all, the ones that are here on site and those on Zoom. It's a lovely day. It's a little bit of nip in the out there. So again, just welcome to Louisa County.
Thank you so much for having us, and thank you for the extra work you and your staff put in to get us ready to be here today. And I was thinking on my drive over, you know, on what probably would have been a 3-day journey by horseback or something from Scottsville of all of the work that our little box truck does.
I passed him coming in. Yes, I did.
On its way to each of the branches. So a special thanks and appreciation to the work that gets done behind the scenes there to make sure that we can do what we do every day.
And Mr. Gentry, who is our, is it mineral? Cuckoo, well, I should have remembered that. I know, he is the cuckoo supervisor from the Louisa Board of Supervisors, and he's our connection liaison here with the library.
Wonderful, thank you very much for being here. Anything you'd like to say to us? No. Not to put, okay.
I'm in the learning stage.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all very much. Unless we have any public comment from the remote attendees though, then I don't believe that I think that covers the room.
If any remote attendees would like to make comment, please raise your hand via Zoom and we'll allow you to make a comment.
And seeing none, then I think we can move along. Do any other trustees have any announcements they'd like to make before we get started?
I was so jealous of the Nelson historic Smithsonian connection that I thought that was wonderful. I just have to say, I didn't know about it till it was, as always, after the fact. But I was so excited, and I hope we do things like that again and up in here in Louisa and all
They needed
around.
more room. This room would be better for.
Yeah.
Well, they did pretty good because the way they set the different things, so you would go in a curve. Like if it was just a straight, you would they couldn't really display much information, but you know, because of the curve. And then they got the schools to contribute to some things, which was really nice.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Okay. Well, moving forward on our agenda, we have chosen to forego our continuing education this month in expectation of a little bit lengthy agenda.
And the people.
So we'll move right into committee appointments and reports. First up is our technology committee. Michael, do you have a report for us? Oh, I'm sorry, Wendy.
Yes, we just met, so we're still digesting items, but what we have done with the committee is get slimmer version ready to go, and we will be working on it and then presenting the staff technology committee will be making some of the revisions. And what we've done is what we discussed earlier about having such an extensive appendix with the all of the kind of operational tools. So they've kind of split it so we have both the broad objectives that match our 5-year plan, and then we went through that today. We're going to put some highlighted suggestions and clean it up, that we will present it to the next 5-year plan meeting, and we'll be working a little bit, but I thought that between the staff working and the suggestions that we made initially at our first meeting, that we're on the right path, and we'll have it ready to present to the board and then take their suggestions and go on a roll.
That would be then a first draft of the 5-year plan from the tech committee next month. Okay. I'm sorry, Michael, did you? Okay, thank you very much. Next on our agenda then would be the personnel committee report.
So that would be Kathy, who is running late and might not be able to join us today.
Okay.
So all the committee meetings are recorded as well. So any board members who weren't on that particular committee, you can go view the past committee. The personnel committee met 2 weeks ago, and they are recommending a one-time pay adjustment for staff in fiscal year 22, along with a title change from the current community network coordinator position to technology services librarian. And I can speak to that a little bit, but basically the bulk of the conversation was about a one-time pay adjustment in fiscal year 22, which also the Budget and Finance Committee discussed. Just up next for the title change, that's Stella Poole's position. She has been at Monticello Avenue basically since a few days after it started there. She is getting ready to retire after many years of service. We just wished her well from leaving the technology committee. And the library is looking to reconfigure that position and the Monticello Avenue services in downtown Charlottesville to keep to the spirit of it, which was to connect the community to digital resources. At that time, it was the internet. That was the big digital resource. And now as we see that being more prevalent, we see people having the internet in their pocket. We see jurisdictions working very hard to bring broadband to every house in their facilities. There's not the same need for that there was in the 90s. So it's going to be more about connecting people to upcoming technologies and blast from the past technologies. Like we currently have a machine at the reference department that will convert VHS tapes to digital recordings. And it's very popular. So people come in, they've got their old family videotapes and they want to convert it to a digital format. They're largely left on their own to figure this out. The reference department is busy with other folks. So this would be a lab at the central library where this position would be responsible for coordinating those efforts. In our bylaws, it states that I am not allowed to create or destroy positions at JMRL without board approval. This is more of a transitioning, so I was mostly making the personnel committee aware, making the full board aware that these changes are on the horizon. It's going to be a lateral move there from Stella's empty position to the new person. So happy to take any questions if there are.
What was the title again?
The new title is going to be Technology Services Librarian.
Oh, okay.
And for my clarification there, then is there an action you're looking for?
Not at this time, no.
Okay.
It's an informational item. It would have come from Kathy.
But moving, sorry, I meant for future months, when that, you said,
I don't believe one is necessary. You and I can
Okay.
talk about it, and if there is, then we can ask the board to make a vote on it. But
Okay.
my interpretation is that we can make that change.
that this is,
I just didn't want to make it, and then the board come back later and say, hey, what just happened here?
thank you.
And just to be clear, review, this is really a public-facing position
Yes,
and
this
not
is-
an infrastructure
This is a public
position.
services position. Yes.
Yep.
Which Stella's has been as
Yeah,
well.
understand.
For many years.
Any other questions for board members?
From a personal standpoint, David, has Stella already retired, or we have a date?
She is still at JMRL, and I'm hoping to bring her in front of the board for some recognition at the April board meeting. And that will be one of her last formal acts at JMRL.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much. We'll move on then to our third and final committee report from the Budget and Finance Committee. Dave, do you want to kick this one off?
I'll kick it over to Tony to chair.
Yep, we had a Budget Finance Committee report on the 16th, meeting on the 16th. And David made a presentation along with AJ to us about that. We're recommending that the library board approve a one-time pay adjustment for JMRL staff in fiscal year 2023, the coming year, at a total cost to the library of up to $370,000. The bottom line is there's one-time funding available in the operational budget this current fiscal year due to high personnel turnover and salary savings. So this adjustment, I want to make sure that everybody understands, would not affect the 5% carryover fund balance for fiscal year 24 that JMRL has earmarked for the minimum wage adjustment. So that was the majority of things. We were waiting to hear from the city on a potential retirement change that the budget committee talked about. We have not heard back from the city yet, so we'll defer any news about that. But basically, that's what we're recommending to the board. And I see under new business, our first item is the one-time pay adjustment.
And Tony, I think I led you astray here. Those numbers jumped a bit. It was fiscal year 22 for the
22, I'm
adjustment,
sorry, yes,
and then the carryovers for fiscal year 23.
right,
We're always in the future.
thank you.
Thank you.
That's about it. Tom?
Thank you very much, Tony. The one thing, Tony, could I ask you to clarify, some of the future funding for that pay adjustment is coming from the same expected salary savings that we're seeing right now, right? We're expecting a replenishment of the minimum reserve fund as we move through, I think it was 3 years of salary adjustment towards a minimum wage, an
Right,
increased minimum wage.
yes, that's correct.
But it's that for this current year that we're using for this one time. Okay,
Right,
thank you.
yeah.
Any other questions? Okay. Wonderful. Well, moving right along then, this same item requires action from us today. David, do you want to explain this is simple board approval, right?
Yeah, so the board has a decision to make about whether to approve or whether to hold for next month to approve to give anybody time to weigh in that wants to weigh in that hasn't been part of any discussions. So certainly the board could have a motion today and discuss and vote, or put it on the agenda for next month. I think this was more of an opportunity immediately to answer any questions that either the personnel committee or the budget committee looked at.
Tony, as the chair of the committee making the recommendation, what kind of timeline are you aware of for getting the one-time pay adjustment out within the fiscal year? Does it cause any problem if we wait to give board members who aren't here an opportunity next month to review this? And
No, we talked about that in the committee meeting, and if the board wanted to just discuss it this month and then rule on it next month, David and AJ, I think that was that would work.
I think likely the business manager and myself in that scenario, Tony, would work with the payroll department at the city to make sure things were ready after the board made a decision. If the board decides yes, then they'd be ready to go at that point. If they decide no, then we would thank them for their work.
Right. And one other thing I wanted to mention in relation to all of this is, as with the minimum wage adjustment, it's about retention. It really is about staff retention and being able to, let the employees, the staff of JMRL know how much we appreciate all the efforts that they've been through these past 2 years and a month with the pandemic and everything that they've been through. And we realize that as they say, when you get on an airplane, we realize you have a choice and you can choose to fly another airline. We realize that you have a choice to work at JMRL, and we'd like to make sure that we reward you for your continued loyalty and service.
Thank you for saying that. Okay, well, oh, sorry.
So Tony, I'm in full agreement with all the goals you just articulated. Just from a due diligence standpoint, I kind of have an impulse to be interested in a little more detail. We've said we're doing a pay increase that has a total amount of, I think you said 375. From what I know right now, it could be 200 to the director and 100 to the staff. I mean, I'm sure that's not the case, and I rely on the committee to have done the right thing. But I'm not seeing in front of me, is this an X percent across the board? Is it distributed in some certain way? Potentially, it could be just an email after the fact, or if we're talking about this next month, it could be a handout for that. But yeah, I feel like the due diligence would be be exposed to that level of detail. I'd like to see, and also probably the public as well.
I have that answer right now,
Yeah.
and I can also email it out. It is $368,000 to me.
Okay.
No, I am not personally eligible for
Yeah, I
any of this
understand.
because I'm an employee of the board. This is about
Okay.
JMRL employees, so none of it affects me. So what we're looking at is $2,500 for full-time staff and $1,250 for part-time staff.
Okay, so it's just a flat.
Yeah.
Okay, that's probably all the detail I would need.
And
I'll send that back up.
the other thing, Mike, to make perfectly clear to the purposes of this meeting is that it is a one-time pay adjustment.
Sure.
Not an increase. It's a one-time pay adjustment.
Yeah, and I think we would want, to the extent that we don't expect it to be available on a recurring basis, I think we want staff to be clear in the communication and messaging that, hey, we had an opportunity here, a one-time opportunity we took advantage of because we had the opportunity. Yeah, there's always an expectations management
Yes.
aspect, which
Thank
I
you.
think is what you've just spoken to as well.
That was part of the conversation that David and I had in preparation of this agenda as well. And part of the question, the reason for my question to Tony there about, we expect to have a similar opportunity next year, but we've already had this conversation about where that opportunity might be obligated, in the pursuit of this larger long-term goal.
Right.
So I think, sort of having that understanding that, we think that this is a very worthwhile, the best way that we can make use of the opportunity that we have this year, but it might not be
Yep.
used the same way next year.
And hopefully we won't have the added burden of COVID on the staff.
Right.
Years.
Yeah.
Because that needs to be demonstrated, the appreciation for that. It's been.
As we continue to take steps towards this workforce stabilization, which I think is a fair sort of umbrella to put all of these efforts under, we should expect to see the call them opportunity funds with which we're implementing these programs to dwindle, right? Because as people fill those roles and stick around, which is the purpose of all of this, we'll see the vacancy savings disappear.
Right,
Yeah.
get the staff in there and healthy and happy.
But yes, using those savings while we have them to try to fix the problem seems like a very good solution. So thank you very much for your work on that, Tony, and the rest of the budget committee. Okay, well then, yeah, if that causes no pressure on any deadlines, I think waiting a month and making sure that we have no further questions from anybody who's not here or from the public seems like a good idea.
There was one other thing I did want to mention. The members of the Budget Finance Committee realized that our director is not eligible for this particular one-time payment, but would also like at some point that he be considered for a payment of this kind, if possible, as a separate allocation, because we thought that his work was no less exemplary than all the rest of the staff in guiding us through this thing. So we can put that on the agenda for next month as well, if we'd like to.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I think we had, David, remind me what we had done. We were trying to realign the discussions around compensation and performance evaluation, and that is coming up again
Yeah,
on
in
our
May.
calendar in May.
In May, close
Okay.
session in May,
Right.
for my annual performance evaluation.
So thank you, Tony. Let's keep a pin in that. I think you're right, and you will find fairly broad agreement among the board, I'm sure.
So Thomas, to make sure I've got everything, you want on the agenda for next month to have a voting item about this recommendation?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yep. Thank you very much. Okay. Any other final questions or comments on the one-time pay adjustment item? And hearing none, we'll move along in the agenda. Okay, yeah, as promised at the beginning, we are operating under a different, a slight change to the Albemarle County ordinance that has been allowing remote participation in our meetings in the past. Albemarle County will be moving to in-person meetings in April. And we will be not too far behind them. David, I'll turn it over to you for a little elaboration.
Sure, I'll give the board the background. The JMRL has been operating under Albemarle County's ordinance number 2816. Last week, or 2 weeks ago rather, Albemarle County ended their state of emergency, which had prompted all of this, so that there is no more state of emergency in Albemarle County. This ordinance, though, allows for their local government to have up to at least 6 months, potentially 12 months, to reconfigure itself to meet the state FOIA laws about in-person meetings. So there is some time here, even though that state of emergency is gone, in order for this board to decide what format it would like to use. And when that clock is over, then the state law goes back into effect in the whole state. Obviously, it's already been in effect, but in Albemarle County specifically. And that would mean that the board would need to have, all of our meetings are in-person hybrid, so there is an opportunity for the public to come comment both in person and virtually. But it would mean board members would need to be in person in order to register a vote on any active business, unless they met certain parameters of FOIA, which would allow them to remotely participate up to, we just looked this up to 4 times a year. FOIA law by state allows remote participation per individual board member. So that's just an FYI, and that probably needs to be looked at in our bylaws as well, the library's bylaws. Bottom line, though, is that the board has some time to figure out what they want to do here, but should have a discussion at this point about what goals are.
I've got a quick question for you about FOIA's take on remote participation. That allows for voting remotely or just?
I'd have to talk to our lawyer about this. My understanding, I am not a lawyer, nor am I a doctor. My understanding is that would allow for full participation remotely, which our bylaws also had allowed for.
Okay.
So somebody could, when we wrote those, it was about calling.
Right.
And now it's about this.
Well, and I guess where I'm going with that is I'm wondering if we can find some flexibility in our bylaws to, in meetings like this where we know that we don't have voting items necessarily on the agenda, to identify those as opportunities to still participate remotely, without having to vote and maybe without having to count it as one of your 4 FOIA eligible exemptions.
I would have to speak to legal counsel about that.
Okay.
I'd be hesitant to make that recommendation.
Sure, I completely understand. That's a weird question, but it was in the back of my mind. But yeah, so this is moving us in a direction of meeting in person. We'll be back at Northside next, and when is our next traveling
I think
day?
in May, we're going to Nelson County.
Okay, thank you. I'm interested to just hear what you all have to say. I'm not sure that there's a lot that we can do in terms of flexibility. The landscape is changing around us. But obviously this has a big impact. Curious to know how you feel.
I do have a question. Okay, we're going back to full-time, face-to-face next month, you said?
Well, that's, I think, what the board is open for
Come on
discussion.
over here. No, I will be in South Carolina.
But you can call in.
I can call in.
If your time permits.
So David, you had mentioned, or Thomas, maybe you mentioned it, that the law allows for up to 4 remote meetings per year. Did I hear that right?
Per individual.
Per
It
individual,
allows for
right,
individuals'
right.
remote participation.
Okay.
And now that the law is very specifically says that that's for personal reasons that have to be made, the wording was something like has to be made clear. I had that. And the caveat, Tony says, such member is unable to attend the meeting due to a personal matter and identifies with specificity the nature of the personal matter. Participation by a member pursuant to this subdivision is limited each calendar year, to 2 meetings or 25% of the meetings held per calendar year, rounded up to the next whole number. So for this board, that would
It
be,
was greater, so that
yeah, that would be 4.
Is it not 3 or my,
Math is not
I
my.
know, I'm just gonna say, I'm totally.
So 3, it
Feel
would be
bad.
3, yeah, a quarter, sure.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. 3
Yeah,
meetings.
I didn't know we were going to drag math into this. I'm sorry.
So what are our options? You
Yeah.
all are totally confusing me.
I think I would boil it down this way.
Time-wise?
Yeah, it's just a timing
Talking
of,
about
so
time.
question 1, do we want to retain indefinitely, which we can do, as far as I understand, a Zoom component to a meeting where it's live and the public or staff use this a lot right now, can join the meeting virtually, and it's recorded. To me, I think the benefits of that are clear and that we should just resolve to maintain that option indefinitely. Part 2 of that would be if trustees wished, and we would always have a physical location as part of that, which is a requirement by our bylaws anyways. So nothing, as far as that goes, nothing changes. The staff, trustees could choose to join remotely or join the physical in-person location. And there's 2 paths to that. There's emergency bonus overtime. I'll call it emergency overtime. That's what you're referred to as the emergency's over, but the ordinance allows an extension of either 6 or 12. And I think you were not 100% clear on which of those it was, but at least 6 months. We have emergency overtime where we're doing what we do right now, which is any trustee can just either choose whether to be remote or in person. After the emergency overtime expires, or earlier if we choose to no longer take advantage of the emergency overtime, the steady state going forward will be, we're still going to have the Zoom meeting. Trustees can still attend in person or remotely, except the maximum number of times they can choose remote. The remote option is 3 per year.
With the caveat, I mean, it is, again, the specificity of the emergency that causes you to be remote has to be identified.
Yeah.
So
right.
so it does,
Yeah, there is a little, you have to say why, but what it didn't say emergency, it just said personal reason.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think if someone says personal reason is, I think.
Right. Gas prices are high.
Yeah,
I didn't feel like
right,
driving, right.
Right, I think you're gonna, I don't see a high threshold in that of what you would say would be valid or not.
Sure.
So to me, the only, starting 6 months or 12 months from now, that's clear if I'm kind of hearing a consensus that we want to maintain this Zoom format, as an add-on to the meeting. It's just really the timing that we can choose between. Tomorrow, we could say, well, we're no longer doing emergency. We're going to start the three-time restriction, or we can wait either 6 or 12 months to say, well, we're going to not end our own, reliance on this ordinance until the very end of the overtime period. That's how I understand. David,
No,
did that help, or
perfect. Thank you
or
very
did
much.
was anything wrong in terms of your understanding?
No, that's my understanding of
Yeah.
what the board's options are.
Thank you.
Yeah, so it's the range of options we're considering is just the timing of when do we
Exactly.
convert
When
from
do we
bonus
say?
overtime to steady state.
And I completely
Yeah.
agree with you. I'm fairly sure we're unanimous in our appreciation for the extra participation that,
Yeah.
the Zoom component brings in. We've invested the technology, here and at other branches to be able to do this. I don't think that this is going anywhere. But right, it's about our own participation and how much time do we want to give ourselves and what does that next step look like? Because we can also, we don't have to go back to in-person meetings in exactly the same way that we were doing them before. So if there are adjustments to the format of those in-person meetings that we can make to make this more comfortable coming back in, like we need to start thinking about those things ahead of time now and give ourselves this grace period to put
Figure it out.
any accommodations in place that we need.
And I think one other thing, okay, so the 3 times is individual. So before, up to this time, it has been, the form of the operating procedure.
Mhm.
So so anytime that we have gone on virtually does not count.
Correct.
Yeah, your ticker, your 3 strikes. haven't been they won't start until we say we're terminating this. We're going to terminate this bonus over time.
The one caveat that I would add, I see we have a comment here from the city of Charlottesville. It's actually Marshall there asking if this question is based on HB 444 that passed the General Assembly. Actually, I'm not sure what that is, but what I was going to say is that anything this board decides, we would need to run through legal counsel to make sure that this is our
We're in
layperson's
compliance.
interpretation of what's
Right,
happening. Legal
Right.
allowance.
Does Ashley have something
The
that
compliance.
I'll
she
talk
could
to
inform us
Ashley
about?
after the meeting to see if their understanding is different. We've got another resource here too, we can work with, once once the board has made a decision to say, hey, how does this impact you all?
Yeah. Our basic understanding at this point, though, is that certainly we can hold this format to next month. So we're bringing this into new business now
So
to
we can
introduce
think
it,
about
start
it,
thinking about it.
discuss
And I would expect, correct me if I'm wrong, David, but I would expect that we can continue this format in our meeting next month. And
My
make a
understanding
decision then
from-
at the earliest.
From Albemarle County and from JMRL's legal counsel is that we can continue to operate under this ordinance. It looks like Meredith has her hand raised.
Oh, I'm sorry, Meredith, please go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I think that I would like to discuss this next month because I believe several of our members who I've never met in person, have only come over Zoom, are missing today. And I would be interested to hear from them. Is this going to be, something that they cannot do?
Yeah.
For health or safety reasons, and in which case we should, reevaluate or discuss what we want to do going forward.
Absolutely. We also, are coming up on our sort of natural turnover for a couple of people in the summer. And I want to make sure that everybody can be making decisions about, re-enrolling for this commitment with the best possible information about how we're going to continue to hold these meetings going forward. So thank you. Yeah, I think we should hold off and continue to gather information and discuss amongst ourselves. And David, perhaps afterwards, if you could, on this subject, provide an email to the group with whatever other information I see you're learning here in the chat.
Sure.
And that might be the best format for us to continue the conversation among ourselves between now and next month. Does that sound reasonable to?
Yeah, I mean, but we are going to be limited by the applicable law. So we,
Right, right.
there's only certain,
Figure out
Exactly, the
what it
landscape
is.
around us is
There's only a certain-
changing without our.
Yeah.
We just have to know the law.
Right.
Dave, could you cut and paste that, those comments?
Sure.
You can
Just to
save
get-
the chat.
I know, but I'm not logged in.
Oh.
I'm saying-
Yeah, we get a transcript of it.
I meant he would-
Yeah, I'd be interested in being able to just
Mhm.
inform myself from those links.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, any other thoughts or comments or questions on that? I know that's a big one, but yeah, here on new
Gotta
business, I
think
want to give
about it,
us,
yeah.
right, plenty of time to think about before we have anything to do on, again, next month at the earliest, for any decisions, so. If there are no other questions or comments right now, we'll move along, and David will look forward to a follow-up email on that
My
item
pleasure. Yeah.
from you. Thank you very much. Okay, well, that is all of our new business. So moving right along in the agenda, we will go to our first item of old business, which was a review of the circulation fines and fees policy 4.225. Michael, you want to take this one away?
Actually,
Oh, I'm guessing wrong all.
yeah, well,
today.
you're on the right track because it says policy, but there are annually two. This is part of the overall discussion the policy committee has about reorg of the policy manual. There are two things that are reviewed annually that are outside of the board's 10-year review of policy.
Mhm.
And they are the schedule of fines and fees, and then the annual schedule of library closings. So it's that time of the year for the board to review both these things, to either take action on today or take action on next month. So this has been reviewed by JMRL Circulation Manager and Brittany Eversberg, and she is recommending no changes. We haven't made any changes to the fines and fees schedule since you can see there 2020, I believe, is the last time. I can't remember what the change was, but she is recommending keeping the structure in place. Of course, there is a strategic plan goal about removing fines and fees, but that requires more in-depth analysis than we have available at this point. So the question is whether or not the board wants to make any sort of change to JMRL's fines and fees structure for fiscal year 23.
They had repeat shows on NPR, and they had the what it was called, like the TED Talk. It was the librarian who's going around talking about getting rid of fines and fees. So I listened for an hour and a half on Sunday, and the whole thing, which gave me a totally different perspective on items. So yeah, I just have mixed feelings after hearing that. If I hadn't gone through the whole item, but at least we still have the 16 and under is the biggest change we've made in the last couple of years, right?
That's correct.
Okay, so we haven't seen any need or indication that
I think the strategic plan goal, Wendy, is for this fiscal year to have a report from JMRL administration and the business office on what the impact would be,
Mhm.
financially speaking. So not in terms of like, what's the right thing to do and what does the board want to do?
Right, right.
Just what would the financial impact be for the board to make a decision about
Removing
removing
them.
fines. Fees generally is like lost books, damaged books, things like that.
Mhm.
Nobody really has removed those.
Right, no, they were just
Overdue
talking about
is the big
fines. I'm
discussion
sorry.
In the library
Yeah,
world
yeah,
about their
It was
value
just
and what to do with it.
Mhm.
To follow up what Wendy's saying, like budget here, I would also like to know what percentage of your operating expenses does this amount to?
The fines and fees that are collected by JMRL go towards an equipment fund, which is separately used so that all the equipment at the JMRL libraries are not purchased by the municipalities. So Louisa County doesn't have to buy these tables and this TV or whatnot. That money comes from fines and fees. So that would be the question, Mr. Gentry, is if we didn't collect those fines, how are we gonna get the computers and tables and
When
whatnot?
did you get attacked, something like that, where you said that?
And then I know we're on a tangent of this future report, but you talked about the financial impact, but I'm also interested in understanding from other localities that have done this, if there have been service impacts.
Mhm.
Have
That's
books, because I've heard from at least one member of the public I can think of who's concerned that if there's not an incentive to return your book, it's gonna you can increase hold periods and so forth. So, and it may or may, and I've heard,
But
no, that
there
isn't happening, or yes, it does
but
happen.
there
But
is a lot of information on that.
yeah, so I'd like to, I'm
And-
just expressing that I'd be interested in not only hearing the projections or expectations about financial
Yeah.
impact, but also
Right.
service is an,
Impact, exactly.
what our money is paying for ultimately is the service we're providing. So I'd like to understand.
And a lot of,
the service.
there is good data in the state, as
Yeah.
this has come up in front of a lot of libraries, like the Valley Libraries went fine-free last year, so Stanton, Augusta, and Waynesboro, so they have some data.
Yeah.
Richmond, so kind of on both sides.
So, yeah. So I'd love to hear it, when we get to that.
Thank you, that's great. My question, David, I see at the top of the special notice here is the out of area annual library fee,
Yes,
library card fee. I thought that was tied to the regional service agreement.
it is.
Okay,
It is in the regional agreement that JMRL charges $30 for usage of the library system by people that don't live in Charlottesville, Albemarle, Green, Louisa, or Nelson.
so that item, not something that we would
That's not
have
something that the board
in the
can
policy,
do.
the ability to.
The municipalities have to change the regional agreement in order to get
Saw that
that.
in here and got excited for a moment. Okay, thank you. Any other questions for David here on this one?
Have we ever done fine forgiveness days?
Yes, we have done, it's been a while though, now that you bring that up, but I think 2 years ago, there was a food for fines drive in which all the branches collected canned foods for the local food pantries and knocked fines off of cards for that. We did a massive fine forgiveness when juvenile fines went away. And then before that, we have done, tied to various other programs like summer reading, incentivized fine forgiveness, basically, where it was like, take part of this challenge and you get a ticket that you can use to forgive your fine. So we, over the 20 years that I've been at the regional library system, I've seen probably 3 or 4 different fine forgiveness programs, but they weren't like the board was involved and was aware and signed off on them, but they weren't like an organized, here's how we do it every time. They were each tied into its own initiative. Excuse me.
Do we have any data on what happened when we got rid of juvenile fines?
Yeah, I think that I could get the hard data on it since then, but there was a projection, and it was pretty close to the projection that it would be a 15% drop in revenue for the equipment budget because of the loss of that revenue.
Oh, I just meant, did we see that people returned their books much later?
I don't know that off the top of my head. I could look and see if we had, more accounts that were in arrears because of that. Some of the data there I might not be able to recoup from 2 years ago in terms of like whether or not holds lists were longer, the things that Mike was talking about, impact on services. I'll look and see what I can find out.
And remind me, did that happen before the pandemic or kind of right during it?
Before.
Was right before.
But
Mhm.
it was like the summer before, is that true?
I'd have to go back and
So the reason for my question is, would any of that data
be impacted.
be kind of just thrown out of whack, so it's garbage anyways, if it happened right when the pandemic was happening?
It was
year
before
before.
I started as the
Yeah, it's
director,
been-
so.
Oh, really? Okay,
Yeah.
no, that's
so it's been a
long
little
before.
while. There was
Yeah,
at
okay.
least a year.
All right,
of-
time
of
flies
right?
then.
It was at
Yeah,
least a
okay.
year pre-COVID.
Okay,
for
fine.
that scenario.
Okay, thanks.
Well, I'm interested to hear how you all feel. I mean, it doesn't look like there are any major changes to this. If we felt like it was something we wanted to vote on, I think that might work, but excuse me. Again, with the understanding that we're not a full board here today.
I'm happy to make a motion that we accept the recommendation to keep the fines and fees the same as they have been in the past 2 years going forward.
Is there a second? Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thomas is valiantly struggling to fulfill his duties.
I forgot my cup.
Okay. Can I get you some water?
That's so sweet. Thank you. The motion carries. Okay, well, moving along.
Schedule.
Yes, another policy review, the schedule of library closings.
So it's time for the library board to set a schedule for closures next year. Next year is also a difficult one, much like this year was, largely because of Christmas being on the weekend. As it was, this past year it was on Saturday, next year it's on Sunday. So there's a proposal here that includes the same amount of closed days as 22-23. I'm sorry, as 21-22. And the same amount of paid holidays, nothing has changed there. The big decision, I think, and it's up to the board here, but are the closure for 4 days around Christmas. It really only impacts the central branch, which has Sunday hours. And that would not be a paid holiday for staff it's only a handful of folks that work at that library on Sundays. They would just work a full schedule that week instead of working the Sunday hours. But it would mean buildings closed. Every other branch, like Louisa, every other branch would be just 3 days of holiday closure. Central Library would also lose that Sunday.
Thank you. I like this approach. I think, the other alternative is to maybe move the Tuesday to a Friday. I see that as having a bigger service disruption impact with people maybe trying to pick up material the Friday before they leave for the holiday weekend. But open to discussion here if anybody has thoughts on that or anything else here on the calendar that they'd like to address.
So David, we approved this 4-day gap last year because of the way the calendar fell. And I had been skeptical of the idea of having 4 days, whether one was already a day off for Sunday or not, it's still a 4-day gap while kids are home from school where people just don't have access to facilities. And you pointed out that it was a very low demand time of year generally, but we did it. Did you get any feedback one way or the other about the 4-day gap?
From this past year, from
Yeah,
December.
and from the public, because we're trading off, it's great for staff, but we're also providing a service and we need to provide the public with the
I
service.
didn't personally get any feedback.
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
It's hard.
It didn't reach you. Yeah.
Didn't reach me, so
Yeah.
there might have been folks at the front desk who wanted to get in and couldn't.
Yeah.
I didn't get any. Usually though, I get calls when there's a day that people aren't expecting the
Right.
library to be closed, like
Yeah.
if there's a training day or something that's closed, and people let me know.
Yeah.
And I would pass that along, so I didn't get any of that. It
Okay.
was also though, kind of the beginning of the Omicron swing there, so
Yeah.
service was already kind of slowing down.
Right.
People were bumpering in for the holidays a little bit.
Okay.
Is that something you'd want to maybe hold off on this for a month and reach out to branch managers and see if there was any?
That might not hurt, actually.
Sure.
It's not a bad idea.
Because I don't
Yeah.
think that this would have any particular urgency to it at this.
No,
month's
the
meeting.
thing the question that I will get is about, earlier, and if people are gonna start trying to schedule things, and they'll wanna know what the
Right,
closures
right.
are this summer, basically, so as long as, and really, it's just Independence Day and Labor Day, and those are pretty set there, Monday and Monday, so unless the board wanted to change those for any reason, I think that there's no rush on this.
Are we fairly,
That's everything else.
clear in our guidance here to David that Christmas holiday, that 4-day weekend is the only one we're sort of considering any questions around and really looking for more information before we decide on setting the calendar here? Okay.
Okay, I'll prepare something and send it back to you.
Yeah, I'm just looking, I'm sure you'll give it to us, at the statistics for usage and all for that whole period and not just those 4 days might be useful to see where the real slowdown is, and especially at the different, I'm just thinking specifically about Louisa,
Mhm.
with the school closed, and internet, with the internet back in the back of my mind. Because the only, big difference
Okay, sure.
between the
I'll see
areas
what I
that
can-
I'm,
what
that
I can
I'm
find to
thinking
share
of.
there, yeah.
But,
Tom, you know, traditionally, Christmas time is one of the slower
Slow, right.
times at the library.
and here there's no transportation anyway.
The thing that happens is what Thomas described, is that people kind of rush in to give materials as they're traveling, or they've got family coming in, they want to get
For those
DVDs for
4
kids, or they want to
days,
get movies for that. So there tends to be kind of a wave
Right.
before Thanksgiving, and then it's quiet over the Thanksgiving weekend, and then it's kind of steady, and then right before Christmas, and then it dims down a little bit until January. So, yeah, let me see what I can find out that would be useful for you, and I'll
I
share
just-
with the board.
Thank you. Okay, so we will
We can just ask Ophelia.
move that then to next month's agenda
Okay,
for a final vote with any updated information. Okay, well, if there are no other questions or comments on the calendar here, we'll come back to that next month. Item under old business today is an update on the budget as we move through the funding jurisdictions, having the opportunity to look at and discuss our proposed budget. David, I think you have some updates and information. to
sure.
share.
I'll just share with the board that Albemarle, Charlottesville, Greene, and Louisa are all recommending full funding of JMRL's request as they are considering their operational budgets for next fiscal year. Those are still up for discussion. They need to be voted on by the board there. Did you have a comment?
We've already given a check, it's just about going through the official process.
Official process. Thank you, Mr. Gentry. From the horse's mouth, as they say. Nelson doesn't present their proposed budget until later in the spring, so we're still working with Nelson County staff, but I think things look good for full funding for the library for next year. I think I informed Tony, I hope I informed Tony, that the budget committee will need to meet in April to review the equipment budget for fiscal year 23. Staff have for the last few years have not put in large requests for equipment while they've seen changing service models, and there hasn't been this kind of as much wear and tear on some materials and things like that. So that the requests that came in this year were quite a bit larger than we've had in the past. And, you know, we do have our eye on that equipment budget and the funds there, and how sustainable that can be long-term. So AJ and I are working on projections to give to the budget committee. They will review them and then append those to the full budget to bring back to the board for review for final voting once we've heard from all of our jurisdictions. And, well, that's enough. I could go on and on talking about budgets. But expect to hear an update from the budget committee next month on the equipment budget for fiscal year 23.
Okay. Any other questions about that? Thank you, David. We'll stay with you for the library director's report.
Okay. Thank you all. So just a COVID update in terms of service. In tier 1, currently we were in tier 2 and then a modified tier 1. Currently, we're pretty solidly sitting in tier 1, which means mostly full services, full hours. You know, anything that anybody is used to being able to do in the library is available now. Masking is not required for patrons and staff. It's recommended. There are masks available if anyone needs them, but there's no masking requirement anywhere, including during library program. So we're working on setting up summer programming, and the goal here is to offer a variety of options to meet people where they are. So each branch is looking at a mix of in-person, hybrid, virtual, and outdoor programming, which is a new thing for the libraries, but that we have, some of our buildings have spaces for it, some don't. So that just depends on where we are. But we're glad to be here. Any questions about the current status of JMRL's COVID response?
So what's the difference between tier 1 and no status?
No COVID.
Yeah, and,
Yeah.
and normal
Fully normal operations,
yeah.
right? It's just a state of readiness at this point, you know, so that we are in our COVID response still and prepared to make adjustments to services if
Up
we
or
needed
down.
to. But yeah, we don't have a metric for when we're done entirely with this, but this is something that the emergency planning committee is starting to look at.
Okay.
You know, when can we say like we're no longer in, we're just open, operating the library services. As I've said all along, there's no expectations that we would, moving forward. I think we've learned enough in the last 2 years that we can continue to offer full hours and services as best as we can, no matter what happens going forward. So I don't think that all 5 of those tiers are still as relevant as they were 2 years ago.
But you could always go back from 0 to 2, if you know, or whatever, if we, okay.
Yeah, so.
But there's no, so it sounds to me like a distinction without a difference is what I'm hearing, I think.
Distinction without it.
Between tier one, the distinction between tier 1 and not having any tiers
Yeah, I
after.
think that the tier 1 is basically, yes, we're aware that there is still COVID in the world.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, same page program wrapped up. The last event was on Sunday. It was highly successful, as was the entire Festival of the Book that it was based around. It was really great to see so many people at Festival of the Book events at the Central Library for them, taking advantage of the offerings. And the author talk with Tracy Chi went off very well. It was in person in downtown Charlottesville at the Code Building, and also streaming on Facebook. Just a reminder to everyone that the Friends of the Library book sale, I guess we don't need to look at that anymore. The Friends of the Library book sale begins with a members night this Friday night, and then runs the 2nd through the 10th. And it is at Albemarle Square in the home of the former Northside Library. So if you're not up to date on your membership and you want to attend the members night on Friday night, you can pay online, or you can be prepared to pay cash or check, I think, in person there. But the book sale is coming up. The Friends are very excited about it. And they've got a lot of material out there, a lot of great stuff. So I look forward to seeing folks at the book sale.
And they don't have any limitation like the with
Correct. Yeah,
different tier.
they're-
It is open now
It
as
is
well.
entirely open to the
So
public, yes.
there won't be waiting lines for,
There are no capacity limits.
right, exactly.
And no other restrictions as far as I'm.
Fire marshal.
Well, there are.
Right, yeah.
I don't think they'll get. April 28th will be Poem in Your Pocket Day. There's a group of library staff working on a couple different things. There'll be poems to hand out at every branch library. Some will go out in communities, and an event, a poetry event, potentially at Market Street Park in downtown Charlottesville, weather depending. Wendy mentioned the Smithsonian Institute's Museum of Main Street Crossroads Change in Rural America exhibit that has been up at the Nelson Memorial Library. Alita and I attended the opening of that. It was a great collaboration, as Alita mentioned, with the schools, the county, and the Historical Society in Nelson. It was really a neat thing. And very successful, very well attended. And just as an update for the staff, I'm sorry, for the board, as it's been a while since you've heard about the exterior holds lockers project. If you recall, we've got 2 sources to help make this happen at 6 of our 8 branches. One is some ARPA funds from the state library that are available to every library in Virginia. And then the Friends Endowment also are supporting 2 of them, one from Grow Nelson Library fundraising and the other from the General Friends Endowment. So the hardware the hardware procurement process is wrapping up. It's the end of an RFP process now. Currently we're negotiating with vendors there. We will need a motion to expend the funds up front. So I'll get this on a future agenda times, just so the board is aware. This is going to be reimbursed by the state library and by the Friends of the Library, but we need to pay for it. The library needs to pay for it up front and then be reimbursed for that.
So that'll be a supplemental appropriation to the
Yes.
annual budget. Okay.
Yes. And they're going to be at the libraries in Greene, Louisa, Nelson, Scottsville, Gordon Avenue, and Crozet. And that is all I have to report.
Do you think that appropriation would be ready in April or May?
It depends on when the RFP process is done. I would like April, that would be great, because there are some timelines on making sure that we meet the state's deadlines on reimbursement. But it might be May. We should know more in the weeks to come.
Okay, thank you.
And there are some delays, as with everything else in the world right now. There are most of the vendors that we've spoken to are experiencing delays in getting
Thought
things
about that.
installed.
Yeah.
So while we had hoped to have everything ready for summer reading, that looks unlikely at this point.
Do you know how extensive that delay is? Do we have any?
It depends on the vendor that's selected.
Okay.
It could be anywhere from 6 weeks up to 6 months.
Okay, but still hopefully by the end of the year.
Oh, yes.
Okay, Thank you. Anything else on your report?
No, I'm sorry, that's all.
Thank you very much. Okay, other matters from the agenda, from the board. One that and David, I want your help, a little reminder from our conversation a couple weeks ago, but just something to put on everybody's radar as we are moving towards the summer. And again, our natural sort of turnover cycle of membership and committee assignments and all of that kind of stuff. Given my new role with Albemarle County, I'm probably not going to be looking to extend my role as president into next year. So I wanted to give everybody here, whatever that leaves us, 3 months or so from next month to start thinking about the process of how we move forward to next year. Last time we had a committee to do the choosing, but it was really just.
I think the committee was mostly Carla.
Carla.
Yeah, she headed a nominating committee for many, many years. And I think last year she was the sole member of the nominating committee.
So we don't really have a nominating committee anymore. And I think for obvious reasons, I'd like to be a little hands-off on the sort of immediate creation of that for this purpose. So David, I might lean on you a little bit for this one.
Sure.
If anybody is interested in spearheading this with David, please reach out to him. And if you're interested maybe in doing this next year, start thinking about that and reach out to David as well. So anyway, that's just one thing I wanted to put on everybody's radar. I look forward to continuing my work on the board, just maybe from the back seat. Any other items from any other board members? No? Okay. Well, future agenda items. I've got a tech committee presentation on the 5-year plan for next month. We're going to take a vote on the pay adjustment recommendation that we looked at today and policy 5.4 that we looked at today. Perhaps depending on how the RFP process plays out, we'll have an appropriation to look at for the lockers. I'd like to get a month to look at the appropriation and then a month to vote if we have that time. So if it looks like we won't, if we could get an email update out about how that request for proposal process is going. And at least get early notification if that looks like it is going to need to be a voting item as early as April. Any other future agenda items I'm missing there?
There should be a policy committee report.
Yes.
Policy
Good.
committee will meet before the full board meeting.
Correct.
And to clarify on the 5-year plan committee, so the 5-year plan committee should be meeting to review the overall 5-year plan. One of those things that they're going to be discussing is the technology goal, which the technology committee's been working on. That might not be ready for them to make a recommendation.
Yeah,
It's
might be
just
in
a
between.
timing thing.
Okay.
But there will be a report from the strategic plan committee.
Okay, thank you for the clarification there.
And there also should be a report from the budget committee as they review the equipment budget for fiscal year 23.
What was the last one there?
The budget committee should probably meet in April in order to get a good picture for the equipment budget.
Okay,
So that's policy, budget, 5-year plan, committee reports.
okay, busy month. Well, thank you again to everybody for all of the work you've put in the month to get us here and through this meeting, and for all of the work that it looks like we have in front of us for another month to come. If there is nothing else to come before the board today, we've got a little extra time, so we'll look forward to a lovely tour of the building here for those of us in person. For the rest of us, thank you so much for joining, and we will see you all next month. The meeting will be adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you all.
I think.